SNL has been on the air more than 50 years, and in that time they've put on some pretty regrettable sketches that aired during the live episodes but have never been released on streaming or on any rebroadcasts of the show. Here are a few that I think SNL would rather not see the light of day ever again, starting with the entire Steven Seagal episode.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
I already made an entire video breaking down this episode in full, and it's definitely as bad as the internet would make you believe. The whole episode from start to finish is an absolute train wreck, save for Michael Bolton's excellent musical performances. According to multiple sources, including former SNL writer and producer Al Franken and former writer Bob Odenkirk, the episode has never been shown in broadcast reruns and is not available in its entirety on Peacock or anywhere else online for that matter. And they keep this episode locked down. Before I released the long-form video about that episode in particular, I tried to do a live stream where I was going to live react to the episode, but they took it down in about 20 minutes. NBC was like super on top of the copyright. And then when I finally put the full video together, I got copyright claimed by NBC a couple of times, and I really had to claim fair use and go back and forth with YouTube before they would actually release the video. So yeah, they really don't want anybody watching this, and I understand why. It's because it completely sucks.
This is what happens when you pollute the planet.
Fight the real enemy.
Okay, let's get this bit of low-hanging fruit out of the way. On October 3rd, 1992, Irish music icon Sinead O'Connor was the musical guest for the second episode of SNL's 18th season, hosted by Tim Robbins. During her second performance, she sang an a cappella rendition of Bob Marley's War, and at the end of the song, she held and subsequently tore up a picture of then Pope John Paul II and said, "Fight the real enemy." O'Connor said a few weeks later in a letter sent to US and British media that the act was a protest against the Catholic Church for, quote, countless millions of children whose families and nations were torn apart for money in the name of Jesus Christ. O'Connor was widely criticized after the performance. SNL's next episode was hosted by Joe Pesci, who said this in his monologue.
Oh, they gave us such a smack.
A few weeks after that, SNL creator and showrunner Lorne Michaels told CBS's Charlie Rose, and Rose himself would later be accused of sexual misconduct against no fewer than 8 former female staff members, his initial reaction to O'Connor's performance was stunned disbelief, and wondered why the singer would stage such a protest on a comedy show. And the Catholic Church, never an institution to shy away from monumental hypocrisy and self-victimization, swiftly demanded an apology from NBC and from O'Connor herself. It was not until the early 2000s when the systemic abuse of children by Catholic priests and the subsequent cover-ups and billions of dollars in settlements paid out by the church when people started to think, maybe she had a point.
I know I'm watching douche commercials on television.
Let's shift gears and lighten things up and talk a little bit about Martin Lawrence's one and only SNL hosting gig on February 19th, 1994, when the sitcom star and stand-up sensation went on a reportedly unplanned and uncleared monologue about feminine hygiene. The clearly coked-up comedian opened his monologue by doing a long bit about John Wayne Bobbitt, whose wife had cut his penis off after allegations of abuse, and this was not a particularly controversial topic at the time, since John Wayne Bobbitt jokes were like half of Jay Leno's Tonight Show monologues in 1994. But I don't think it was this train of thought that got the monologue banned. It probably had more to do with what he had to say next, which was about, well...
Some of you are not washing your ass properly.
Yeah, so he goes on for like 2 straight minutes about smells, very specific types of infections, making questionable hand gestures, and just being generally gross. I personally don't think the bit was all that funny, and I guess the powers that be agree with me, because this monologue aired one time and has not been seen since.
Save me, you stupid whore!
Easily the most hilarious sketch on the list. I think it's the twist at the end which caused this sketch to be permanently banned and scrubbed from all the re-releases of the episode. This sketch is called Tales of Little Women, and it starred episode host David Hyde Pierce, David Spade, Janine Garofalo, and Chris Farley as mid-1800s young people ice skating on a frozen lake. The ice gives way and Farley falls into the water, followed shortly by his castmates. This is what Farley reportedly called a fatty fall down sketch, where the humor is largely derived from his ample frame flailing about and his booming voice shouting censor-approved expletives at his fellow actors.
Son of a bitch!
Every time I see this sketch, it does make me laugh, and it's kind of Chris Farley at his absolute best. But it's this twist at the end which I think led to the sketch being banned, where Satan offers to rescue everybody, but for a price.
I want you all to myself in that nearby tool shed for 5 minutes. Anything goes.
So SNL does have a bit of a history of airing and then disappearing child abuse sketches, a lot like this next one we're going to see, which is just, I don't even know how to describe it.
Dr. Henderson, what are you doing?
I'm examining you. I'm a doctor, you know.
In what one Reddit user said is the worst, most uncomfortable sketch SNL ever did, Chris Elliott plays Dr. Henderson, who was driving the babysitter, played by an in-drag Mark McKinney, home, and in the process feeds her alcohol in the form of a trendy, at the time, Zima, and then proceeds to assault her in the front seat of his car. This sketch ends with Dr. Henderson in prison, loudly proclaiming,
I do it again!
So what the hell even is this sketch? That Chris Elliott's character commits a statutory crime and then doesn't regret it? I guess the humor is supposed to come from the tension that the audience is feeling, that the interaction between these two characters is going to lead to something nefarious, but in my opinion, it doesn't really land that well. I just sit there waiting for a punchline that just never comes. I love a bit of edgy humor, but this just isn't funny. I don't know, maybe it's me, maybe I don't get it, maybe it was a funnier at the time sketch, but I vaguely remember watching this live and having the same reaction. I was certain that there was something that 14-year-old me wasn't getting, but on rewatching this, 45-year-old me still doesn't get it. At least McKinney's teenage girl character was fictitious. A few years earlier, the show had made some pretty crass jokes about a real-life teenage girl that landed just about as well.
Okay, number 2, Chelsea.
Wayne's World is one of the most popular SNL recurring sketches of all time, so much so that when they made a movie based on the sketch, it became the highest earning SNL film of all time, with the next closest competitor, Blues Brothers, making only half what Wayne's World did. In 1992, Wayne and Garth were featured in SNL's Cold Open with a top 10 list of things they love about Bill Clinton, Slick Willie having just been elected president about a month prior. Numbers 10 through 4 were pretty typical Wayne's World jokes, like jokes about his huge head and Claudia Schiffer, but when the duo gets to number 3, things kind of go off the rails. At number 3, they put the Gore daughters, referring to the 3 children of Clinton's vice president Al Gore, who at the time were aged 19, 15, and 13. And the host gives the teens their trademark schwing, which at the time didn't seem to stir up controversy, but when I watched this sketch again to make this video, I was pretty shocked this got a pass. But that's not even why this sketch was banned. What caused the firestorm at the time was when Wayne and Garth got to number 2 on the list, Chelsea, referring to the first daughter, Chelsea Clinton, who at the time was only 12 years old. Mike Myers and Dana Carvey's characters were particularly cruel to Chelsea, saying this.
While it's true that adolescence has been thus far unkind.
And then they go on to call her a future fox and a babe in waiting. If you ask me, the insinuations made about the Gore daughters were way worse and way more graphic than those made about Chelsea Clinton, but I guess Bill and Hillary complained a little bit louder than Al and Tipper because Mike Myers wrote an apology letter to the Clintons and Lorne Michaels later publicly apologized on behalf of the show. So I guess the lesson is, as long as the middle-aged men are thrusting their pelvises about teens and not calling them ugly, it's okay to sexualize teenage girls whose parents decide to put them into the spotlight to further their own political careers. I wonder if Bill ever apologized to Chelsea for the way that he treated her mom, as well as his numerous appearances in the Epstein files? Guess we'll never know. Speaking of apologies, SNL had to issue a big one to a stand-up comedian after blatantly ripping off some of his material.
How about a glass of red wine?
Ha! Aren't you drinking?
This is Jay Mohr. He was a featured player on SNL for 2 seasons in 1994 and 1995. He also wrote this book, Gasping for Airtime, 2 Years in the Trenches of Saturday Night Live, released on June 9th, 2004. In the book, Mohr details his time at SNL, mostly focusing on the heavy workload, near impossible production schedule, terrible hosts, and his steeply declining mental health during his time on the show. He also admits to stealing a bit from fellow comedian Rick Shapiro and turning it into a sketch that aired on March 18th, 1995. The sketch is called O'Callahan and Son, and the premise is that there's an angry Irish bartender who yells at all his customers. I didn't find the sketch funny, nor did I find the stand-up it's based on funny.
What? I shouldn't talk to a customer like that? Well, it's not a customer anymore. You're not a waiter anymore. You're fired. I don't like you. Now get out.
Again, maybe this is just me, but the stand-up bit isn't funny, and the sketch that ripped it off isn't funny, so if you're gonna steal material and put it on SNL, why not steal something good? In his book, Mohr writes, quote, I took Rick Shapiro's act and wrote it down word for word and submitted it as my sketch. When the sketch was picked to be on the air, I was officially f***ed. The sketch was banned from rebroadcast, according to Mohr's book, but in my opinion, it should have been banned not just because it was stolen, but also because it sucked.
Guess what? Not a lot of black folks on the show. Right.
A lot of things that were let slide at the time have since come back to bite the show and performers in the many years since they first aired, and the most notable example of that is probably the blackface impression of Chris Rock that Jimmy Fallon did on the March 11th, 2000 episode of SNL that was hosted by Joshua Jackson. The sketch starts off fairly innocuously, with Chris Parnell playing Regis Philbin, but it soon devolves into a millennium-era minstrel show when Jimmy Fallon comes on stage in full blackface, doing an admittedly spot-on Chris Rock impression.
How many grams of crack did Rick James smoke when he recorded Super Freak?
I looked hard to find a source condemning Fallon's use of blackface that was published at the time the episode aired, but I came up empty. Mostly the criticism comes from May of 2020, when it seems the clip resurfaced online and forced Fallon to come to terms with his tasteless performance. That's funny because I seem to remember the world being super distracted by something else in May of 2020, but I guess no matter what's going on, there's always some room for that selective outrage. You know, selective outrage. It's a pretty good title. Somebody should use that. Moving on now, does anyone remember this bit of nonsense?
Jamaica, man, you know.
This is the most recent of the banned sketches on our list today, but it's not really even a sketch. On May 10th, 2003, Adrien Brody hosted the show with musical guest Sean Paul, and for whatever the hell reason, Brody decided to introduce the Jamaican rapper in full Rasta face, doing the accent and everything to very tepid and uncomfortable laughs from a bewildered studio audience. It's been widely reported that this is the reason the two-time Best Actor winner has never been invited back to host another episode, but Brody denies that he's officially banned, saying in 2025 that he was never aware he was banned, but acknowledging that he's never been invited back in the 23 years since the incident.
Hello, I'm Robert Goulet.
This next sketch has flown under the radar a little bit, but it's actually not banned at all. In fact, it was released on one of the Best of Will Ferrell DVD compilations that SNL used to put out pretty regularly. In the sketch called The Coconut Bangers Ball, SNL legend Will Ferrell plays Canadian crooner Robert Goulet peddling a new album of rap song covers. One of the songs Goulet covers is Sisqó's Thong Song, which was tearing up the charts when this sketch first aired back in 2000. As anyone who's heard the song knows, the literal 10th word of the song is the N-word, without the hard R given, but in Ferrell's performance he really leans in and delivers an N-word in the spirit of the song without a hard R, but it's still a little touchy even these 26 years later.
Another I couldn't handle it.
One more N-word rounds out the sketch, one in Goulet's rendition of Papa by Notorious B.I.G., and then the sketch wraps up. Ultimately, I think the point of the sketch is to have a singer like Robert Goulet unknowingly be racially insensitive by covering the work of rap artists literally word for word. It does work on a humor level, but I suspect the sketch would be done much, much differently had it been done later in the show's tenure. Ferrell's portrayal of Goulet is really, really funny, and the sketch is actually pretty good. I mean, it's definitely a classic, but in the 26 years since it's aired, it hasn't engendered nearly as much controversy as Ferrell's portrayal of Chris Rock. In fact, I couldn't find a single source mentioning the sketch in critical terms or suggesting Ferrell or the show apologize. Ferrell has done interviews where he is critical of some of his past work, including his famous portrayal of Janet Reno, but to my knowledge, he's never brought up the Coconut Bangers Ball sketch in any of his post-SNL interviews. If you can think of any other banned or hard-to-find SNL sketches that I didn't go over in this video, drop them down in the comments and I might make a part 2. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching the video today. Don't forget to get subscribed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.